allergies, cough and asthma issues, clearing of entities, which could be like ghosts. So I use my pendulum, and my pendulum basically was like moving because maybe you're crazy or then you have a spirit attachment.
Oh dear, that is a problem. Hi, I'm Eileen.
Hi, I'm Umi.
And today we're talking about pendulums. Okay, so what is a pendulum?
So a pendulum is basically any crystal of like or metal piece, preferably with a pointed point at the end of like a string. So the string can be fancy like that, or it can be just a very plain metal chain. There are also versions where we use like a rope or leather. Yeah.
So does that mean that if I have a rope and a string, it will work?
Yes.
Oh really?
If you can actually maintain the balance like of the rope, so it has to be nicely balanced so that when you hold the string, it can like, kind of like stay still. And as long as there's a point, it can work.
So it has to be like pointed like that?
Ideally, but it doesn't have to be a perfect like point.
Oh.
So for example, if you have a pendulum like this, yeah, so it's like, it's not exactly a sharp point, it's like there's a crystal there, but this can work as well.
Okay, so what can a pendulum be used for and how should it be used?
So a pendulum, usually you want to use it for answering yes-no questions. Okay. You can also use it to test like the energy of objects or spaces.
Okay.
So for example, I can use my pendulum to test the energy of this essential oil.
Okay.
Usually positive direction is clockwise.
Clockwise.
So this essential oil is positive and has fairly strong sort of like energies. I can also test like, let's say your chakra.
Okay.
So let's say I want to test like your throat chakra, so your throat chakra is going in an anti-clockwise direction but that's normal because recently you have had some allergies and like cough and asthma issues. So your throat and your lungs area would actually be in a negative would spin in a negative direction.
Okay, then that's where I can meditate to clear it out until it becomes positive.
That's correct. So the pendulum can also be used to measure energies in spaces. So it can go beyond telling you whether there is positive energy or negative energy in the space. So for example, so I do house clearing for people, and sometimes this house clearing includes clearing of entities, which could be like ghosts, or even like more serious like entities.
Has that happened before?
Yes, many times. I remember I went to it's a semi-detached house, and why I was called in was because the workmen had put up a glass in the kitchen, and every night when they leave, the glass would shatter. And there's this particular part, like the rest of the house is okay, only this particular part. After it happened 3 times, they called me in to check what was like happening. So when I went there, a lot of the house was fairly clear, but there were certain configurations in the house which was attracting entities. And there was one particular very strong entity that was actually hiding in there. So we had to detect where the entity was hiding because it was not where the glass was, but somehow every time it came out, it would pass the glass and then the glass would break. Yeah, so I used my pendulum, and my pendulum basically was like moving, and then when it got to this space underneath the staircase, it actually went in this propeller fashion like that.
So that
which is impossible for a pendulum, super negative. Yeah. When it actually sort of became this propeller shape, it almost like flew out of my hands. Yeah. So very strong energies will cause it to spin in very, very large like circles. Yeah.
Okay, so can you share how to use the pendulums? And from what I understand is that clockwise is positive, anti-clockwise is negative, but also front and back is positive, and then this way is negative.
Yes, so in the pendulum course, right, I teach people how to program the signal.
Okay.
Because if you were to try it on your own, the pendulum may actually dictate differently. So, for example, there are some people whereby yes is a clockwise and no is an anti-clockwise. If you take my course, you actually learn how to program the signals into the pendulum. You've actually programmed the pendulum. What is the yes you want to see? What is the no you want to see? What's the positive and what's the negative directions you want to see? Yeah.
Okay, can you show us simple steps of using a pendulum as a beginner?
Okay, so the first thing is that you want to place your feet flat on the floor,
Okay.
and sit comfortably.
Okay.
And for as a beginner, it's good if you can have a surface on which to rest your elbow. Okay, so because why? When the pendulum actually moves, it's very normal when it's moving. You shouldn't stiffen your arm. So when it's moving, your arm may sway a little bit, but as long as you're not doing like that, which is a very obvious.
It's moving.
You're moving like your hand. But if you sway a little bit, it actually does, because you can see swaying your hand a little bit does not, if you're not asking the pendulum to do anything, doesn't actually cause the pendulum to move in the direction that you want. So therefore, your hand being relaxed is extremely important so that the pendulum can move and give you the answers that you want.
Must it be the dominant hand?
Ideally, because how the pendulum works is it's tapping into your own intuition and sixth sense. So it's not magic, and it's not like some spirit is controlling or ghost is controlling your pendulum. It's totally not like that. And of course, if you are more like psychic and you're channeling like angels and guides or the universe or higher power, then the pendulum can tap into that as well. But otherwise, for beginners, if you don't know how to do any of that, the pendulum is literally tapping into your intuition and sixth sense. Okay. When you actually want to use the pendulum, you just need to make sure you can hold the pendulum sort of properly. Okay. However, if you've just bought the pendulum or you're borrowing somebody's, it's good if you can cleanse it. So there are some simple ways to cleanse it. If you have a singing bowl, you can actually put it into a singing bowl and just use sound to cleanse it. Okay. You can also hold it over like candle flame to cleanse it. And of course, if you have like sage and like Palo Santos, you can also smudge it. Okay. Once you have actually sort of like cleanse it, what you want to do is to dedicate this pendulum to the highest and purest light. Okay? So you can actually sort of just hold it and then just think in your head, I dedicate this pendulum to the highest and purest light. So this is just to make sure that the answers that you're getting is straightforward and clear, and also have no ill intentions. Okay? You can also choose to program the pendulum to tell the truth, so that you can't manipulate the pendulum. So usually if you think that you are psychic enough to be able to control the pendulum, then you want to program like this. So once you have actually done that, just allow your body to feel relaxed and grounded and calm. Okay, and then now you can actually ask like the pendulum what it is that you want to ask. So for example, it has to be a yes/no question.
Okay.
So for example, is Eileen in Singapore? So the pendulum will say yes, because obviously you are in Singapore.
The interesting question is, does Eileen think that she's in Singapore?
Okay. Then you see, does Eileen think she's in Singapore? Then the pendulum goes into like a no.
Because I just said no!
Yeah, because the pendulum taps into what your intuition is. So if I intuit that you don't think you're in Singapore because maybe you're crazy, or then it would be possible for the pendulum to say no, that Eileen is not in Singapore.
I know, so people will usually want to ask, let's say money related or relationship related question. So can I ask, like, will this person like me if I like this person?
So then you have to be very specific.
Okay.
So assuming this is a friend.
Okay.
So if you ask, will this person like me if I like this person? It may say yes because you're friends. So you wouldn't be friends if you don't like each other. I mean, logic.
So I have to change the question. Like for example, if let's say I like this person, then I must ask, then I will have to ask, would this person want to be in a relationship with me? Can that happen?
Yeah, but you have to be even more specific because a friendship is also a relationship.
Love relationship.
Yeah. Any question with a if is very tricky because if you said, if I like this person, would this person want to be in a relationship with me? Means that you are not sure if you like this person.
So I should be sure and say, I want to be in a relationship with this person. Will she or he be willing or agree to be in a relationship with me?
Yes.
Because okay, then be willing and agree is two different things, right? Because the person might be willing but not get into a relationship with you.
So that's why the formulation of the questions is the most important.
So for example, a lot of people I think would want to ask about money because we're living in Singapore, right? So can someone ask like, will I earn $1 million this year?
Yes, you can ask that, but it really is more a question of can you keep that $1 million, right?
Okay, so
earning the $1 million, maybe you earn it for your company.
Oh,
So they did earn it, but not for themselves.
so I have to ask, can I earn $1 million this year and keep it and it's maybe $1 million cash?
Then it becomes very complicated.
So how should I ask in this case?
The pendulum might get confused. First of all, it depends on what you want to use the $1 million for.
Oh.
So for example, if you want it in cash, then you might want to say, can I earn and keep $1 million cash? So you keep it really straightforward. Okay? However, the pendulum might say no. There is something that that I actually intuit in people's energy called the money ceiling.
Okay.
So what happens is that the money ceiling caps you at the kind of net worth that you are able to achieve. So if you want to ask like a money question, I think the first is to figure out where your money ceiling is, and then you can ask based on your money ceiling whether you can actually earn and keep that kind of money like this year.
So in order to do that, for example, the person can hold the pendulum and ask, for example, is my money ceiling 10,000? Is my money like that continuously
you
go
can
up?
just go up. Okay. Usually for most people, money ceilings is in a range.
Okay.
So you may not get like exact like 133,450 kind of like amount. You're more likely to get like a range between 100 to 300,000. Most people, their money ceiling does fluctuate.
We are going to talk about some misconceptions. There is yes and no, right? Is there a maybe?
Ideally not. Because a maybe answers doesn't serve you.
So which means if it's maybe you are confused.
Yeah, that means your energy is lacking clarity.
Okay, let's talk about finding out more than you want to know. Then don't ask lah!
That's not possible because the pendulum can only tell you yes or no. So the questions that you formulate will be the questions that your pendulum is answering and not anything like else.
And can it anyhow transmit messages from wandering spirits?
If you take the right precaution, it should not. If it does, it's not the pendulum, it's you.
Okay.
Remember, the basis of it is that the pendulum is intuiting what you are either feeling or sensing or is in your subconscious or in your energy. So if the pendulum is transmitting an energy from a spirit, then you have a spirit attachment. It is still tapping into your energy, except that your energy now has an additional attachment, which is an entity.
Oh dear, that is a problem. Okay, now right, I will demonstrate the importance of programming. Now I'm going to say that, okay, I'm in Singapore, right? So the pendulum is going to tell me yes. Right. Now I'm going to say I'm in Australia. I'm in Australia, I'm in Australia, I'm in Australia, I'm in Australia, I'm in Australia.
So the pendulum is still saying like yes. So basically, because the pendulum is actually tapping into your energy. So if your energy believes that you're in Australia, then therefore the pendulum would actually also believe that. Okay, so going back to the love question, and so if you really believe, you can actually force the pendulum to say yes, this person can be your boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, simply because you believed it so much.
So what does that say about the person's and like my energy? If I can lie to the pendulum?
It just means that you have an ability to maybe have a strong conviction and belief in certain things, no matter how ludicrous. Okay, so sometimes this is a mark of a crazy person.
Oh.
Yeah, because if, for example, if you meet like some of those people who are mentally ill, sometimes they believe certain things that that are absolutely like not true.
Am I mentally ill? Am I mentally ill? No. It looks like it's going to say yes, so I better stop now. Okay, that's it for pendulums. I'll see you next time.
Bye.